The Zika virus is spreading at explosive rates in the Americas, prompting the World Health Organization to consider it a public health emergency. And as such, the Ministry of Health, in partnership with other government ministries and stakeholders, are working together to contain the mosquito responsible for its spread. At a media conference today, Minister of Health Luke Brown says his ministry is working with local and regional health professionals to develop an action plan, as well as placing a greater emphasis on fogging and building the capacity of the vector control unit to allow them to increase the scope of their activities.
Health, wellness and the environment through the vector control unit has intensified fogging nationwide. We now carry out daily fogging, whereas fogging was previously done on a need-to basis. We have employed an additional driver at the vector control unit in order to be able to cover ground more quickly. Information on the fogging schedule is provided through public service announcements and news releases. In addition to fogging, the vector control unit is taking other appropriate measures to reduce the mosquito population, including a measure known as ovi-trapping, where mosquito eggs are trapped.
Brown says another dimension in his ministry's plan to destroy the mosquito, which is also responsible for chikungunya and dengue, is the implementation of a nationwide cleanup campaign, which will first target key areas across St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as looking at the legal tools available to achieve what he calls sustainable mosquito control.
The Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment will organize a national cleanup campaign. We will start in the areas that have the highest mosquito indices, namely Rose Hall, Westwood, Chumuka, Clare Valley, Connery, Byra, Park Hill, Sign Hill, Bel Air, Adams, Kingston, Camden Park, Bucament, Barreley, and Paget Farm, Beckwith. This response would evolve into a full-scale and all-encompassing thrust towards the renewal of primary health care in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We plan in the long term to use all the tools at our disposal, including policy and legislative tools, to achieve sustainable mosquito control. We are considering the ways in which we can strengthen our laws and possibly institute a system of ticketing for households that are habitual mosquito breeders. The Aedes aegypti mosquito must be stopped.
Senior Environmental Health Officer Todd Lewis says whilst the cleanup campaign is important, his department will be focusing directly on the Aedes aegypti mosquito, particularly looking at its breeding grounds and what he calls targeted containers.
We at the vector control unit, we focus on the vector itself, the vector in this case being the mosquito, because whether it's like I mentioned, it's a different type of virus, we have the mosquito here. So in the case of our cleanup campaign, for example, we are focused on targeted containers. By that I mean those that breed mosquitoes. So the question you asked is a very relevant one in terms of the other litter that you might have, that you see the trend in St. Vincent. But for this particular exercise, we want to target those breeding sites, those containers, so to speak. Minister mentioned about probably the vase in your house. You will not throw that out, but we can sensitize you on how to actually deal with that particular container. But the focus will be the targeted containers.
Meanwhile, Chief Medical Officer Simone Kiza Beach says that in the event of an outbreak of the Zika virus in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, her ministry would advise women to delay pregnancy, as the World Health Organization has linked the Zika virus to the neurological disorder known as microcephaly, which causes babies to be born with unusually small heads as well as retarded mental growth. Dr. Beach says that abortion is not allowed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines unless there is a danger to the life of the mother, and says her ministry will do its part to advise persons on the risk of getting pregnant during an outbreak.
Our stand is that all mothers, persons pregnant or persons thinking of getting pregnant, would be informed. We want to inform you about the risk. Bearing in mind, nothing has been confirmed, but we want to inform you about the risk, the possibility of what might happen. We also have to be aware of the fact that microcephaly, a small head, cannot be detected until the last phase of the pregnancy. And even then, the certainty of that diagnosis is not 100%. So you cannot say to a mother, you're pregnant, on ultrasound, your baby's head looks a little small, and therefore you should do X or Y, because that baby could be born and could be totally normal.
In outlining some of the symptoms that a person may experience once infected with the Zika virus, Dr. Beach says testing goes hand in hand with the ministry's ability to detect the presence of the disease. She's advising persons who are experiencing such symptoms to seek medical attention immediately.
What we are asking is that if anyone experiences symptoms, which would be a temperature over about 37 degrees, fever, rash, joint pains, a red eye, without, not a runny red eye, but a dry red eye. You might have, some persons have vomiting, child in Jamaica had vomiting. If you experience any of those symptoms, we are asking that you seek, go to a healthcare practitioner, because we need to test so that we can determine whether or not you have a regular flu, whether you have Zika, whether you have dengue, whether you have chikungunya. Unless we test, we would not know. So it would be one thing for you to sit at home and say, oh, I think this is just an ordinary thing. If we don't test, we won't know. So I'm urging persons, not necessarily to flood. We want you to seek advice, go to a healthcare person.
Under the theme, We Can, I Can, this country today joined the rest of the world in commemorating World Cancer Day. From 2009 to 2013, figures show cancer as the leading cause of death among Vincentians, particularly breast cancer in women and prostate in men. President of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Medical Association, Dr. Rosalind Ambrose, emphasized the importance of giving support to persons who have just been diagnosed, as well as those living with cancer.
Some patients may suspect that they've got something like that, and so we encourage patients to, particularly if you're coming for breast screening because you've already felt a lump or something, have someone with you when you go to the doctor. If you think doc says, well, you have cancer, and you either don't believe it or you're not sure what you heard, you need to make another appointment, visit him again, and sit and talk about that, because your support is extremely important. You need people to be there for you if you need to have medical things done like blood donations. General emotional support is absolutely critical. People in the family needs to understand what you're going through. The children will notice that there are differences in either your mood or your activity. So it's important to speak with people in your family circle, your loved ones, people who are close to you. That is extremely important.
The medical practitioner says cancer can affect anyone at any stage of life and pleads with persons to continually get checkups for early detection.
Everyone and anyone, nobody is spared, and now where we know that it seems to be increasing because of, we're not sure why. Is it environmental factors? Is it our diet? There are multiple reasons why it may be increasing, but also we've got a lot more diagnostic tools to screen people, to do various tests. The real linchpin is the knowledge for the patient to accept that if I'm bleeding when I pass my stool, that's not okay. So you need to come and get that looked at very early. Because you see, if it is detected early, it's better controlled, the outcome is better, the treatment and the whole management system is much better for you. If the patient waits until they're kind of, just really can't cope with it, they're really thin and things are going downhill, that diagnosis is going to be late, and so your chances of recovery are going to be much, much reduced.
Director of the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, Dr. Carissa Etienne, will pay an official visit to St. Vincent and the Grenadines on Monday, February 15, 2016. While here, the PAHO WHO Director will be engaged in field visits to the organization's funded projects, including the Georgetown Smart Hospital, as well as hold discussions with health officials in Fancy. The Director will on Monday, February 15th, make courtesy calls to His Excellency the Governor General, Sir Frederick Ballantyne, and to the Minister of Health, Wellness and the Environment, Robert Brong, along with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sir Louis Straker. The Director will then tour the Georgetown Smart Hospital, where a brief news conference will take place at 2 p.m. On Tuesday, February 16th, there will be the hosting of the PAHO Regional Managers Meeting. The opening ceremony will take place at the Beachcombers Hotel from 10:30 a.m. Embracing the need to have greater involvement of the Vincentian public in the management of marine areas, Minister of Tourism Cecil Mackey expressed hopes of having more persons educated about the significance of marine conservation. Minister Mackey says the Eastern Caribbean Marine Managed Areas ECMAN initiative is quite timely to get more persons to reduce negative impacts on the marine environment.
And I want to go a step further. It would also give us the opportunity to engage the authorities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to say to them, let us use our diplomatic channels to get more scholarships, to get further training, to get further financial support, so that more persons can be engaged in this particular area, aspect of marine management, resource management, so that we'll have more persons to go out and tell the story, more persons trained to be able to engage more Vincentians in the process and the opportunities that we have in this particular sector.
Noting that what happens on land affects what happens at sea, Minister Mackey says issues such as the cutting down of trees in the mountains and on coastline, along with the dumping of garbage in rivers and at sea, continue to plague the marine environment. He notes that numerous individuals still rely on the marine life for a livelihood and appeals to persons to be more aware of their actions.
So we have to also engage the persons who are involved in agriculture, in farming, and the practice of burning coals, etc., so that they become conscious of the impact that they can have in the very areas that we have identified that we are going to be doing work in. What about the marine aspect, the sea? A lot of persons depend on the sea for their livelihood. They depend on the very area that we have identified for their livelihood. A lot of us also depend on the marine resources to sustain our diets, and we know that we get quite a rich diet from the sea, again coming from some of these areas that we have identified. So if we do not have these areas as protected areas, what we are going to find is that more and more damage will be done to these areas. Persons will continue to dump in these areas, which would also impact negatively.
As part of the Ministry of Education's efforts to improve the quality of the education offered at all levels of the education system, a number of primary school teachers were engaged this week in a 3-day child-friendly school CFS training session. Chief Education Officer Luan Gilchrist said that persons should not think of the child-friendly school initiative, which has been in existence for close to 4 years now, as a project, noting that it is a set of practices needed in order to make a friendly and conducive environment, which will enable effective student development.
It was piloted in St. Vincent and the Grenadines about 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, with 12 schools. To those 12 were added 23, and now you belong to the second set of schools, primary schools, third set of primary schools, which are being exposed to the child-friendly schools modalities. You are about half of the remaining half. Next week, your colleagues, the remaining 34, will be trained just as you are going to be trained this week. So by the end of next week, we will have covered 68 primary schools in the nation with the child-friendly schools modality. Bethel High School is the secondary school in which the child-friendly schools modalities are going to be piloted. In fact, they were trained. Their staff was trained. When I say staff, I mean teaching staff, administrative staff, ancillary staff, as well as the staff of 5 other secondary schools.
Valuing the commitment of educators to the CFS initiative, the focal point person for the program here, Elizabeth Walker, says it is important that persons understand and assess the CFS initiative in order for them to enhance student development. She further notes that teachers are the push factor of the initiative and that they must ensure that whatever they learn is implemented so that their students can benefit.
You might be asking from our observation over the last 2 or 3 years, have we seen changes in the schools where the initiative started? And I would say emphatically yes. And I know some of you would have visited some of these schools and you would have seen the difference in the physical environment, the difference in the interaction, the difference in student participation, etc. And you will be exposed to that material during the week. We encourage your participation and your involvement, and I know you're going to learn from us and we are going to learn from you, because these practices are not new. And I'm sure that there is some level of child-friendliness existing in your schools even now. So it's just to enhance it and further develop it so that our region can develop.
After 4.5 years as head of the Diocese of Barbados and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Bishop Jason Gordon has ended his tenure in this country and will take up residency in the Barbados district. On Tuesday, February 2nd, the Cathedral of the Assumption held a farewell mass for the Trinidadian-born Minister of the Cloth, who has been very outspoken on issues locally, regionally, and internationally. Bishop Gerard County, also a Trinidadian whose last tenureship was in Mexico, will be the new bishop over St. Vincent and the Grenadines Diocese and will be ordained on Saturday the 20th at the Community College. In an interview with SVG-TV News earlier today, Bishop Gordon says his service to this country was a learning experience that he will cherish. As for what he is most proud of during his tenure here, the bishop said the fact that he was able to impart to his congregation the importance of not only professing faith in Jesus Christ, but also living that faith each day.
Barbados and St. Vincent enjoy many similarities, but they enjoy many differences. And that has been really an education for me, coming from Trinidad, which is a third entity, which is different again. So I would say the 4.5 years have flown by. I would say that we've had great achievements in the 4.5 years. The church in St. Vincent and the Grenadines has been much more alive, and people have experienced what their faith is about. And I think if I have to put down to one area, I would say that I've helped people to recognize there is a deep connection between our daily lives and the faith that we profess. And we can't divorce what we do on a daily basis from the faith that we have in Jesus Christ. If we say we have faith in Christ, then we have to live by integrity. We have to live by truth. We have to live by saying the things that are true and giving example to people by what we know to be true. And it is bridging that disconnect that I think has been one of the high points or the main emphasis of my tenure.
According to the bishop, his most memorable time here was Synod 2015, where various persons from leadership in the Roman Catholic faith came together to formulate plans to build the church.
Initially, I had 109 people come together to say what they wanted to see for the church. And that's leadership right through the church, and at every level of the church. And listening to that, what they wanted to see was unity. That was the number one. And then participation was the number two. And then youth and evangelization and all the other things that flowed from it. And based on all of that, we then positioned the church very differently based on what the leadership and a wide spectrum wanted. And in that positioning, we then prepared the church for Synod. And Synod 2015 was a serious high point in my tenure. That was 260 something people coming together to say what they wanted to see for the church and to pass resolutions on the way forward for the kind of church we want to become, and to pass resolutions on the way forward for the activities and the structures that would help the church emerge and become everything that we were dreaming about.
And in assessing the developmental needs of this country, Bishop Gordon is of the view that there is a greater need to have what he terms as an agricultural revolution. The bishop is of the view that the country has the potential to create employment and feed many others throughout the Caribbean. However, he says for this to be achieved, youngsters must get involved.
All of the children coming with education, what are they going to do? And how are we going to get them into what jobs?
So we have to push people out of the top to get them into the bottom. So we have to think about an expanding economy. We have to retrain people to think agriculture, not just as hard labor, but hydroponics and technology, and use everything we have and throw it behind the agricultural model. And in that sense, maybe we need an agricultural revolution. But we need to have a way of thinking, growing up the economy, so that the young people coming out have ideas that they can go towards that don't necessarily mean big business have to employ them, but creative entrepreneurship that they can engage in, that can connect back to create both quality and volume to impact the international market.
The Roman Catholic bishop says for there to be agricultural revolution, the upcoming generation must see food that is cultivated as not being menial and below them.
But we have an incredible land resource. But we have inherited a plantation system where our young people think that that's massa and massa they done. And so our young people don't see agriculture as a way forward, they see it as a way backward. But the world has been talking about a food scarcity for the last 12 years. I mean, at one time I was going to the Urban Forum and to the big conferences on climate change. Every 2 years I go just to get a sense of what's happening. And food scarcity and water scarcity have always been on the top of the agenda in the big nations. We can feed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we can feed the whole Caribbean with our eyes closed. Plus, the products that Europe and America and Latin America need that are in short supply.
The St. Vincent and the Grenadines Beekeepers Association is encouraging farmers to work with the association to ensure shared benefits. President of the SVGBA, Beverly Reddock, says it is important for farmers and beekeepers to coexist and to work together for the growth of the bee population. Honeybees are the most economically valuable pollinator worldwide, and many high-value crops such as almonds, apples, avocados, and cherries are almost entirely reliant upon pollination services of commercial beekeepers. Globally, 9.5% of the total economic value of agricultural production for human consumption comes from insect pollination. Reddock, who was speaking at the opening ceremony of a national symposium and honey show yesterday, at the MIS conference room, says it is also important to maintain indigenous hives in nearby coastal areas, since maintaining the genetic stock will make beekeeping management much easier and improve honey production.
The sustainability of the beekeeping industry depends on what farmers are practicing and not practicing on their farms. Farmers and other stakeholders must be sensitive to the proper use of pesticides and good agricultural practices. To threaten the local honeybee population will result in decreased food production, and farmers will receive negative returns on their investments. In taking the industry forward, we have identified the following components in the medium term. You would notice that we have a budget of activities which we will be using in the medium term to develop our industry. Identification of pests and diseases. And you will see and observe that going forward it will be a fairly expensive program.
Reddock noted the expense of the program and urged the business community, technical missions, and the various embassies to recognize the importance of beekeeping in SVG and to get on board. She further listed some of the critical areas to the development of the Beekeeping Association and the beekeepers industry for the next couple of years.
Identification of pests and diseases, construction of hive bodies, honey production and post-harvest handling, honey show and symposium, annual beekeeping congress, baseline data survey, administration, characterization of our local honey, which is very important, and that is an area that we need to do because we need to get a unique honey. So with a unique honey, we'll be able to get more in our marketing. The importance of hybrid queens, the importation of bee equipment, production of trees, and fauna and flora, innovative beekeeping, introduction to beekeeping. These are various training areas that we also have to do. So this evening, I would like everyone to take on board some aspect, especially of our embassies and our business community, some aspect of our budget and our activities, so that we will be able to partner with you in taking this industry forward.
Agricultural instructor in the Ministry of Agriculture, Alan Williams, is also encouraging more participation to assist in the development of a beekeeping industry here in SVG. Williams says since 2006, the apiculture industry has grown by leaps and bounds as concerted efforts with focused programming were instituted to develop the subsector, which he says is an important contributor to the economic growth and development of the country.
The apiculture industry in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which primarily deals with the production and sale of honey, is now valued at an estimated of 384,000 EC dollars, and that is the value of our local consumption here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that is coming back from an all-time low since 2006, where there was zero production of honey and there were no local honey producing in St. Vincent, and there were no honey in the supermarkets. This was due to a pest called the varroa mite, which attacked the bees, leaving behind weakened colonies and made them highly susceptible to other pests and diseases. And the industry was left devastated.
Williams says the demand for honey is far outreaching, and that with the growth of the local beekeeping industry, it can be a reputable choice among all subsectors in agriculture.
The apiculture sector in agriculture could very well be a high-income earner, but the development must be channeled and well harnessed very expeditiously to maximize economic gain. Firstly, from the Ministry of Agriculture, we recommend that a thorough analysis of the situation or the synopsis of the beekeeping industry be made, and we implement strategies for the development of our local honeybee industry. In Trinidad and Tobago, just to draw a synopsis, in 2004, the retail price for honey was just $60, $60. And by the end of 2010, the price for honey has almost tripled, $240 for a bottle of honey in Trinidad and Tobago. During this time, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we still have the freedom of having honey just around between $40 and $55.